expect, say, the proportion of spendings available? You said it's now 10%, maybe it's 12%. In France, I think it's 13, 14%. How many percent would that go up? And where would people then have to save the money? Is there any indication? Because this would help us also in the argumentation on the political level.
We haven't calculated how it would affect the real incomes of consumers in the European Union. But we've calculated what would happen if the price of grain doubles, what would happen to the price of your breakfast roll. It would go up by 5 to 10% depending on the roll that you prefer to eat for breakfast. But the issue is that the poor humans in the world, of which we have 1 billion, have a purchasing power of $1.25 or less per day, and who have to spend 75% or more of their income on food. And they don't eat the processed food; they eat the raw. Buy the raw materials and process it themselves in the household. So the share of income that they spend on food is much higher, and they spend it on the agricultural raw materials, while we consume processed food to a much higher degree. So it really is felt a whole lot more in the poor countries. The price increases that we can expect may be a nuisance. I've tried to calculate with my wife how it would affect us, but we really couldn't find anything very significant. So we may find it bothersome that prices are higher in the future than we've gotten used to in the past. But the problem is with the poor of the world who live in developing countries.
I can say a few things about the experience in Britain, but not across Europe. In actual fact, where we got down to in Britain in 2007 was households were spending 8.2% of their income on food that was eaten in the home. You know, as people get more affluent, they tend to eat out, go to restaurants more, etc. And that figure's gone up to almost 10%. So the effect of the recent surge in prices has been to reverse that and put up the percentage slightly. And 2% of the United Kingdom's GDP, which stands at about 1.5 trillion at the moment, is an awful lot of money that's been diverted. Look at it another way. I produce for an organisation an affordability index every 2 or 3 months. The affordability of food in Britain got to its lowest level ever in 2007. It was then sharply reversed, and the affordability of food, as defined by that measure, went back to where it was in the late 1990s, and now appears certainly not to be improving at the moment, and perhaps continuing to deteriorate. Then you can look at some individual categories. One of the first casualties of rising food prices was expenditure on organic foods. They fell by about 30% following the rising prices. People ate out less often, and a lot of these premium products that food companies had been drifting towards over recent years were reversed or cut back. So already we have seen significant changes. Already we have seen some reaction, and yes, we're back to where we were a little earlier. Not sure these things are going to improve under the scenarios we've spoken about until there is some major intervention, such as the benefits of science and technology. So, as I've said earlier, not a dramatic collapse overnight, but certainly not an improving situation, and already switching money away from the rest of the economy.
Okay, thank you. So we have 2 last questions. One is Jacques, one is Jean-Charles. Maybe we can bundle it and have it in one last question, and have 2 final words of the panel speakers here.
Okay, so it's more an extension of the comments that you made. We had in 2007, 2008, when there was the first wave of price increase of agricultural commodities, we had food riots outside Europe, but basically there was no visible impact in Europe, because the economy was still quite strong in Europe. We now see again some food price increase. Nobody knows how long it's going to last, but that's there. And the major difference is that if I take Greece, Portugal, Spain, France, now the UK, all these countries are in front of major structural adjustment. These structural adjustments will have no doubt a strong impact on the purchasing power of the population, either by increase of taxes or by reduction of wages. The question is basically, do you see that it's a very unfortunate, but a conjunction now of a different situation compared to what we had 2 years ago, the possibility that politicians will react differently, because this time they cannot really be supported by a booming economy in Europe. Thank you.
I just want to come back, if possible, to Tom's question, because I don't think we got a general answer, which I support, but more precisely regarding what can be done in other countries. Like today we talk about UK, we talk about Germany, and you show us that you are working hard, you have facts, you have figures, which are very useful for us. Based on your international network or connection, we are between us here, so we are looking solution together. Do you have any suggestion, names of people in some specific countries you consider ready or potentially ready to really jump out of the box and communicate on their findings, providing, of course, their findings are more or less in line with what you say, which I think they will be. We can take the specific case of France, for example, if possible. Perhaps it's too specific, but I think I'm sure you have some names.
Among agricultural economists, there is almost unanimous agreement on the severity of the world food problem that is ahead of us. And there are excellent agricultural economists in France as well. And maybe at lunch I can tell you the names of those, and in other countries also. But I want to get back to the policymakers. When prices were high, very high 2007, 2008, and again this year, policymakers tend to point their fingers towards the bad speculators who are driving up the prices. But in fact, it has been policymakers in 2007, 2008, and again in 2010 that have driven up the prices by this new form of agricultural protectionism. They try to provide inexpensive food to their local populations by keeping the price of food down by means of introducing export restrictions. And that's exactly what we've seen in China, in India, in Argentina, and some other countries. When prices were high, they kept the price of food low by restricting exports. And of course, there was were fewer commodities available in the market, and the prices were even higher than without this policy. And this time around, it was Russia that started to restrict exports of wheat. And Ukraine just announced a few days ago that they will follow suit. They will also restrict agricultural exports. And I would bet that if prices continue to be high, that other countries will do the same.
Okay, I think this is already your final statement, I guess. Would you like to have a couple of final words directed to the...
Well, I was just going to try and answer the question, but I'll wrap it up to it. I don't have any names off the top of my head, but I would make this observation. If you look towards Eastern Europe, and again, you know, the environmental groups have been ahead of you here because they've been trying to persuade an awful lot of those countries to push down the way they wanted to go. They don't get the same level of support as farmers in Western Europe get. They have enormous potential, and I just wonder whether anyone is seriously trying to open up a debate in the eastern part of the European Union, where I think there is enormous scope, and probably because of the lower levels of support, perhaps a greater willingness to listen. Let me just say in conclusion, you know, I'm very pleased to have been invited here to talk to you. I believe quite passionately that you know, for all the reasons we've set out, that we are on the cusp of a new revolution in the world. I happen to believe that things like crop protection, but really the same sort of ideas that we attach as normal to other industries, the way of thinking, the sort of drives, etc. All of these things have got to come to bear and will come to bear, I believe, on agriculture in the coming years. And of course, you're in the vanguard in some respects. You're at the scientific end of this. And can you think of any advanced economy that hasn't had to rely on the science and benefits that have flowed from chemicals? I mean, this is what we need to think of the whole time. Where can we use science and technology to better the quality of people's life and to meet the challenges? I haven't got a shadow of doubt it can only come from science and technology. You're not going to be able to do it by turning the clock back. You just can't do it. A few minutes thought, really, at the end of the day, makes it obvious that that is a ridiculous quest. So be a little prouder of yourselves. If you don't stand up and speak a bit more loudly, then don't expect Greenpeace to do it for you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to close the session here with a couple of sentences I'm taking out of the discussion. I think all arguments which we need are there. It's first of all a matter of communication, and it's a matter of courage. So thank you very much, Sean, that you addressed it, and you addressed it as well, von Witzke, that we need the courage to go out and communicate and make our point and argument, and don't hide behind politicians and others. We may also have to find allies to fight the fight with us, but I think the first step we need to do ourselves. With regard to the CAP reform, I don't think that there is any point to argue with DG Agri or even the farmer organizations about the budget. But we can argue, for example, with the finance DG, because they have to pay the invoice ultimately. And why don't we talk, for example, to people like Olli Rehn, that farming long-term does not need so much support if it is done properly? Because we have the arguments already, or even with a regional policy who could get a bigger chunk of the cake if they know that so much money does not go to agriculture. Because ultimately, and that's what both of you said, the subsidies basically also contributed to the cut of investments into agriculture and to a reduced incentive for farmers to produce more and more efficient.